Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healthy Dog Expo podcast. I see we've already got some people in the room. I figured that was going to happen today, as our guest is one of the most popular people on the planet when it comes to amazing dog supplements. I am thrilled to introduce to you Julianne Lee of the Adored Beast Apothecary. She's one of the co founders and the formulator there. And I know a lot of you guys out there are using her products, especially the GI type products that we use to stabilize the gut. Julie's going to tell us a bit about her history. We're going to talk about the products and the needs for them. And she's going to share some new exciting stuff that maybe has not been shared many places before. So welcome, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, perfect timing. It's going to be like a brand new thing. Yeah.
It's
awesome.
gonna be awesome. And people, as you're commenting, where you're watching us from, keep in mind that there's a slight delay with the comments from when you type them in to when we actually see them. So, we will address your comments and questions, which we welcome. But if there's a delay or if you don't get an answer, feel free to type it back in. There's going to be some important links for you to the various social platforms and some exciting research. My team will be dropping those in the comments, so you'll be able to click and go after the fact. So, Julie, what's going on up in Canada right now? What's
Lots of
happening?
snow.
A lot of snow?
Yeah. Yeah. And very cold.
And
It's
you're
very,
in
very
British
cold.
Columbia, am I correct?
No, I'm actually in Nova Scotia now. I
Oh,
was
you're
in British Columbia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then when I sold my vet hospitals, I moved to Nova Scotia with the intention of starting Adored Beast Apothecary. So
And when did Adored Beast actually start?
my vet hospital was called Adored Beast Veterinary
Oh,
Clinic.
okay, right.
Yeah. So we were like the first licensed holistic veterinary hospital in Canada, which was a massive challenge to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It's 1997. So that was like pretty major stuff at the time. And then, through my practice of, it was really funny, exciting, cool. I don't even know how to describe it. But when I started my practice, there was no such thing as titer testing.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. And I was sending it to I think it was might have been Wisconsin University. I can't remember.
Wisconsin or Kansas would be
Kansas. Yeah, probably Kansas. And so then I finally sat down with the pathologist at a company called Central Laboratories, and we started digging into doing our own in Canada, and we did just the dog ones, and we started off on a Tuesday and Thursday. Those were the only 2 days that we could do them. And, it was really a challenge. The Vet Association there at the time didn't support them. They didn't want us to do it. There was a big fight back around that. But, now it's great. Like everybody does them, and it's wonderful. Yeah. And then I used to also have a column for the Vancouver Sun called Adored Beast. And I wrote about holistic medicine, and people would ask questions and send it into the Vancouver Sun, and I would answer them and stuff and have columns. And I wrote about, I think it was 2001, I wrote about the positive impact of probiotics on animals' guts. And didn't go over very well. I got fined. But
yeah.
Yes.
You and Andrew Jones and Peter Tobias, so many excellent veterinarians had trouble with Canada.
Yeah, it was rough. And with me especially, because my background is I'm a vet tech initially. And then my dog got cancer, and it was 4. And I was really upset. And I grew up on a very holistic atmosphere. Like, we weren't vaccinated as children. My mom was very holistic minded. And when I went to school to become a tech, I really jumped ship and wanted to do everything conventional. And I think that's why I have such a an understanding of the fear around, conventional veterinarians being concerned about things and stuff, because I drank that Kool-Aid too,
Mhm.
like you kind of have to if you want to learn. So I do have a lot of sympathy for that. So anyways, um, I, I did my tech program, and then my dog got cancer, and there was no way I was going to do conventional medicine, and I was
Yeah.
devastated. So I started working with our herbalist, our personal herbalist for our family.
Mhm.
And I took him to a board certified surgeon, and they were going to have to resect a huge piece of his bowel, and it was like really guarded prognosis. And they couldn't do it though for 11 days. So in that 11 days we did like SEX suppositories, and
Mhm.
we did all of this stuff, like intense stuff with this dog. And then I took him in, and I got a hotel and expected to stay there for 5 days. And
Mhm.
they called me and they said, Dr. I think his name was Wilson, wants you to come in so he can speak to you. And I was like, oh God, he died.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was
Wow.
terrified. And I went over and he said, young lady, I like I liked that back in the
That
time
was
I
nice.
was. And
Yeah.
he's like, young lady, I don't know what you're doing, but please keep doing it, because it went from the size of a large plum, where we would have had to resect his bowel, to the size of a grape, and completely within its own encapsulation. And we didn't have to resect anything. And his prognosis is much better than it was.
Wow. That is
So unbelievable, eh? Like it turned my life
cool.
around in that instant.
Yeah.
So I went, after he recovered. I said to my mom, I'm done. I don't want to do anything with animals anymore. Like I'm so discouraged and disillusioned, and because I was in a lab, looking like, oh, this is weird. Every single time something's vaccinated, this happens, and
Mhm.
why is this happening? I was in a very big clinic.
Yeah.
Why does this keep happening? So I'm going to try to say this really fast, but it is an interesting story. So
Yeah.
once Rudy recovered, I took off to Europe to just try to find myself and
Mhm.
decide if I wanted to be a naturopathic
Right.
doctor. What did I want to do? And I got super sick in Spain. And I used to get hemorrhagic gastritis from stress. So you can imagine. And I was very sick for like 2 weeks when I would get it. And I got it when I went to Spain, and went to the hospital, and, they put me on IV and the whole 9 yards. And then they asked me if this was chronic and had I had it before. And yes. And when do you usually have it? It's, well, I'm really stressed out and whatever,
Mhm.
major life changes in my life, didn't want to
Sure.
do what I was doing. And they treated me with a homeopath treated me.
Oh.
I didn't get any drugs. I didn't get Flagyl. I didn't get anything that they normally would give me.
Mhm.
They wanted to, usually they wanted to always give me prednisone, like the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And they treated me with homeopathic medicine. And within 3 days, I was backpacking. I was back out backpacking. So for me, that was like a divine
That was
intervention.
transformative.
It's like I was going to Europe to try to figure out what I wanted to do. And lo and behold, I was like basically
Well,
cured from this thing that I had for like 10 years.
yeah.
And it was crazy. So, make a long story short, I wanted to become a homeopath. And to do so, I would have had to go to England or Europe at that
Right.
time. And
Right.
I didn't want to take all my dogs. Then UBC started a program. So I went out, I flew out, I was accepted, and I went out to do a 4-year human homeopathic medicine
Mhm.
program with my horses, with my dogs. I was like a caravan going over
Oh, you
from
must have loved
Toronto,
yeah.
to Vancouver, full intentions of becoming a human homeopath, and then going back to Toronto.
Mhm.
And within like 3 days, it was like, oh my gosh, I got to do this on animals. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So then I did that. And then I went to England and did the British Homeopathic Veterinary Surgeons program in England. And that was a 3-year program.
Yeah.
And then I've been traveling all over the world, like doing other stuff. So I opened my vet hospital, and it was a challenge. It was a huge challenge. And they weren't accepting my, who I was, and blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah. I
you were
wasn't a vet. I wasn't a
oil and
vet.
water. Right.
Yeah, and I wasn't a vet, and I was this and I was that and whatever. So Um, I challenged them, and one of the most brilliant veterinarians in the entire planet, his name was Dr. David Roosh, and he found out about me and said, "Could I come sit in and learn from you?" And he had done Dr. Pitcairn's course, and he came, and we were partners in well, he was like my main vet, but it was very interesting, and I'm going to just say this really fast. The way it turned out was really to my advantage because I was allowed to recommend drugs, titrate drugs, order tests. I could do all of that stuff, and that's when I really started doing my formulas. Right, was in my clinic, because people were coming to me for the first 5 years with everything that was dying, like everything that was dying.
And isn't that the curse of what do you want? Natural, holistic, alternative, complementary medicine. I imagine on the human side too. You
Yeah,
start with the most hopeless cases,
you do. You
and
really, really, really do.
train wreck after train wreck.
Yeah. So I just started, from a perspective of like gut health, let's say.
Mhm.
I was a newbie at doing homeopathy, or I felt like I was,
Right.
but I guess I really wasn't. But uh, before I would do anything, I would change their diet, because it would usually take me like
Mhm.
like a week to really dig into what remedy to give. So I
Right.
changed their diets, and I would do a bunch of different things. And then they would come back to see me. I would maybe switch some drugs around, things like that, and then to maybe something less invasive, or whatever, do blood work, do whatever we needed to do.
Mhm.
And then it seemed like every time I'd switch their diet, they would get some soft stool, right? Or they would get some kind of GI stuff.
Mhm.
So then I would apply all my probiotic stuff and everything that I knew about probiotics. And all of a sudden, this was like literally like maybe 1999, I really started seeing, holy man, like not only is it helping when I deal with the gut, it's helping everything. It's helping
Yeah.
emotional stuff like aggressive dogs, cats
Mhm.
that are like everything you could possibly imagine, plus cancer, plus skin disease, plus, right? They were able to either maintain their remedies longer, or it started making massive differences in their lives like right away.
Mhm.
So I really started digging into probiotics back then, like in 1999, and I was working with a microbiologist and really trying to learn. So then I just started making my own, digging in, doing my own research, going, oh, that's so interesting. That strain really helps that. That strain really helps this. These three strains together really makes a massive difference with this. So I'm a nerd. I'm a science
Mhm.
nerd.
Yeah.
And so I just started like trying things and formulating things and whatever. And then I was getting an incredible success with it. And I have an amazing, she's a colleague of mine now, but initially she was my technician. And she's just like, can we start making some of this stuff up and having it? Because every time you do this, we're making it up from scratch, right? And she's like, you're like, this clearly, anyways. And then one day she said to me, you need to be making this and letting the average person purchase
Of
this, you
access.
know? So it was in the back of my mind, but I mean, I owned and operated 4 different clinics in Vancouver, like really big clinics in Vancouver for, 20 years. And then I also taught a 3-year homeopathic medicine course for veterinarians and graduated, I don't know, 42 vets that I
Nice.
wrote from in Vancouver. So it was an evolution of what I saw a need to be, and what I think, what people always say, oh my God, you went through such a hard time, right? Like you went through such a hard time. And I don't know, do you know Dr. Grognan, the Jeff Grognan?
Oh, you know
He's
the name, yes.
Yeah, he's got some podcasts and stuff too, but
Yeah.
um him and I have had a conversation because he was on the board of the vet association when this was all happening.
All the yeah,
And now
everything
he's
is working
he's
on.
totally holistic and stuff.
Mhm.
And he said, I feel terrible that what we put you through, like what you went through. Like I really did go through a lot. and, second mortgaged my house and got a divorce, and like, it was intense. It was really intense.
Yeah.
And, but, when I sit back, if I had, if I was a conventional vet there and I was exhausted and it was like, 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm trying to figure out, there would have been times where I would have just prescribed drugs because I would have just been like, I don't know what to do. This is like, I couldn't. I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. So a big part of my success in my practice, because when I sold my practice, they did the bank did a thing, to make sure that it was worth what I was selling it for and stuff.
Occasionally, yeah.
I worked with more than 36,000 animals in my career. So I think my mom always used to say to me, "You've got an angel on your shoulders," and I always think it's my animals. And I was able to navigate that, had to navigate that. I was forced to figure it out holistically. There was no questioning. And then the more I got into it and the more we worked with lawyers and the vet association, then I got into being able to do all of the conventional stuff other than surgeries
Yeah.
and diagnostics and things like that, with Dave. And so the formulas basically came because I remember going to a lecture and I went to it was a lecture in the States,
Hmm.
and the SPCA vet, the head SPCA vet was lecturing, and I remember her saying the number one reason for elective euthanasia was skin disease, and I
Unbelievable.
almost fell on the ground. I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God, okay, I got to figure something out. Like, this is what I have to
Yeah.
do. So that's when I started really researching gut trauma and leaky gut syndrome. And I started putting protocols together for leaky gut, and I saw a phenomenal difference in animal skins and autoimmune diseases in general. So then I dug in and I worked with a functional medicine practitioner, and I really, really, really learned. And then I was working with microbiologists and the whole thing. And then I developed this, but I did it in a way where it was like protocols, because to put together, I remember Rodney Habib one time said to me, like, your protocol's 5 products, but if people were to go purchase them
Hmm.
themselves, they'd be buying like 35, 40 different things, and they'd be
Right.
trying to put them all together. And I said, yeah, because I've learned that I have to make it effective, simple, and people have to trust it. And
Hmm.
part of the trust for me is the sourcing of the ingredients.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
I'm
and
a
that's and that is such a fundamental point that applies to foods, supplements, all the products shampoos. Um, I think I told everybody Melissa from Four Legger is coming to the expo. Her sourcing of ingredients for shampoos. If there was one thing I could improve in the general products that people use, it would be sourcing. So
hundred.
I love that you're hitting on that first.
Well, it was the very, like, I have Dion Albert as my business partner, and I'm telling you, like, I don't know a better business partner than, because I don't like that stuff, like the businessy stuff of it, and he has never once deviated with me going, I don't care how much it is, I'm not going to use that product. I don't care if it's X amount less expensive. And one of the things, I don't know if are you an energy person? Like, do you believe in energy
Oh,
stuff?
yeah.
Okay.
And
So,
I think most of our audience does as well.
okay, cool. So people aren't going to think I'm crazy here.
No.
So, my big thing is people, pets, and planet, or pets, people, and planet is probably more my
Mhm.
thing. Or it's probably pets, planet, people.
Well,
To be
yeah,
really
that's probably where
honest,
I'd be.
I'm probably getting blushing because it's true. But so for me, I can't think that what we ingest, if it's hurting the planet, I can't energetically get my head around it, because we are so, we need to be grateful for everything that the planet and Mother Earth and nature does for us. But when we're actually taking something from her to heal ourselves or heal our pets or heal our children. I can't, it's like an oxymoron to me that we are like chopping down rainforests or not paying attention to what we're doing when we're taking from her to heal. So for me, a big focus is, does that ingredient not only not cause harm in nature, but is that company giving back? Are they being mindful to actually give back to nature and not just take from her, right? So that's where the sourcing starts. And I have a wonderful girl that works with us. Her name is Leith Henry. And we hired her just to source. That's all she does, is she goes through every single company. Well, how do they use their water? What do they do with this? How does this grow? What do they put on it? What's the fertilizer? What's, whether it's organic or it's not organic, it doesn't matter, because organic is one thing, right? Organic means that there's certain standards that you can't put fertilizer and things like that on. Not, like my whole entire farm is certified organic, but it doesn't mean that I have to be mindful of what I'm doing to the planet. They're very different. And for me, that mindfulness is more important than anything, because it's energy for me, right?
So I would even extend that to the people, your employees, taking care of them as well.
Everything.
Everything.
Nothing, and that's what I always say, and we can get into this, my research and stuff, but I love science. I am a real nerd, but I also believe that there's so much more than science, and we know basically nothing when it comes to anything, really.
None of us know what we're doing.
No, we don't. And I really feel like for the last 5 years, I've been saying that our company, ABA, is looking backwards to move forwards. So, ancestral stuff, and, just like, how come 200 years ago, or how come 100 years ago, we weren't seeing these diseases? Why are our dogs and cats living when we have all of this, engineered stuff, and we could, people want to do the very best, and even for ourselves, why are we living less and with chronic disease earlier? And even in the health industry, like, it's blowing up, which is amazing, because when I would first start talking to people in 97, they thought I flew in on a broom. They were like, what? Titer test up, don't vaccinate your dog. What, raw food? Like, are you crazy? Like, it was now
we have
bombarded
advertising on the Super Bowl.
Everything, right? So we even have to be more mindful of, digging in, transparency, what's going on. And I think the interesting part of it is that I'm a really big believer in like wisdom, So when I'm kind of going into everything, because I know you wanted to talk to me about probiotics.
Yes. So, I mean, the two formulas that I see clients bring into me are leaky gut and yeast. Those, and I'm sure those are your top two most requested products.
Yeah, because those are the protocols. So those are ones that I created in my hospital.
Yeah.
That, I know for 20 years that they work. Like, there's no questioning what they do and how they can help. But then we moved into species specific, right? So, like, to me, bacteria is everything. And that's what I wanted to say about science, is that we have science, but science can't justify wisdom. And to me, wisdom comes from bacteria, dirt, trees, mycelium, mushrooms, energy, air. That's where we even have our wisdom tapped in from farther away, right? Like, let's say your grandma, let's just say, or your great grandma was a midwife. Let's just use that, right, as an example. That wisdom is inherently in you when you're born, right? Like, it's part of, and we know that, like when we look at DNA and we look at environments and things like that, we know that all that stuff shifts. So while I'm over here and I'm really sciencey, I'm also like, okay, this is awesome. This is awesome.
Yeah.
But we have to start paying attention to what's around us. So the leaky gut protocol was developed at my clinic to try and alleviate the symptoms of any kind of autoimmune disease. So not just allergies, not just, just anything immune mediated where the body is over alert, right? And because what did we see? We see prednisone, we see atopica, we see all these immune suppressive drugs.
Yeah.
So why? The number one thing is that because antigens and toxins are leaking into our bloodstream or into our animal's bloodstream because the barrier of the gut is non-functioning and stretched and damaged and traumatized. It's really not difficult to understand. It's really, really, really simple. And so, for me, it's like, okay, well, we can feed it the best food in the world and we can do all of this amazing stuff. But if things just go right into the gut and into the bloodstream, we are going to have constant immune-mediated diseases, autoimmune diseases.
Right.
So it's based on a very, very kind of like scientific, very structured way, which is, I address the over-vaccination piece in it because I feel like that's part of the influx of being autoimmune in general.
Part of a key aspect of the assault on the immune system.
Exactly. So we start off with that. We support the liver because when the gut's not working correctly, the liver has to work overtime. And then we try to digest the food because it's not going to heal overnight. Right. So we try to like pre-digest the food so that when the particles do go through, they go through already pre-digested rather than in its macro form. And then we're addressing everything to heal the barrier, right? The mucosal lining and restore that. And then I have a homeopathic remedy that I created at my clinic because what I used to see a lot, because we had our own ultrasounds and stuff, and when you see inflammatory bowel disease or you see stuff like that, the first thing, what you say to your patient or your client, this is the thickening or this is the scarring. Right. This is what we're seeing. So I wanted to try and heal leaky gut and reduce the scarring, because even if it heals, then we're still behind the 8 ball with the scarring, right? Or
the non-functional areas of
exactly. So there's a homeopathic remedy in there that increases epithelial tissue, so supports that, but it also decreases scarring at the same time, like literally at the same time. So I'm a really big believer in. I did a lecture and I lectured to the American Homeopathic Veterinary Association about functional homeopathy and physiology, because I love physiology and how everything works. So these remedies, that's what they do. Because I'm like, okay, well, but what if we do this? Then this does still happen. Like, that's just kind of how my brain works. And then the yeasty beast is same thing, is that if your dog has yeast or it's going to have leaky gut, because it just trashes the mucosal lining, right?
Right.
So, and people, everybody is doing everything under the goodness of their heart.
Right.
But when you see, I wrote an article once called "The Overcultured Canine," and this is coming from a company that has a ton of pre and probiotics, and I'm like, whoa, hold on, we're like giving too much of this stuff, because and I know this, but what I would see all the time and hear all the time is, okay, my dog has X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to feed it all of this probiotics and fermented food and whatever, which is right. It's not wrong.
Yeah.
But then what happens is the body starts to kill the yeast too quickly. And then you get something called a Herx, right? That Herx looks identical to yeast. So, but really what it is I think that yeast has 15 toxins.
Yeah.
It is die-off, right? Because it produces like 3 times more toxins than when it's alive, even.
And then the
So
owner comes and says, this isn't working, and yells at you.
yeah, like if you're giving like all of these probiotics, right? Or they go to a veterinarian that doesn't know about that, and they're like, "Oh, more ketoconazole, more this, more that, because your yeast is getting worse." Because that is honestly what it looks like. It smells like everything. So I produced this protocol that doesn't have probiotics in it. It targets an enzyme and herbs to slow, and we have a diet with it initially.
Mhm.
And the thought process is, let's weaken them first. Then, so you're weakening them, and then the enzymes are ingesting them, and
Mhm.
then we're weakening them more, and then the enzymes are ingesting them, and we're doing it in a way where the body can respond without
Yeah.
freaking out, right? And
It's
crashing.
a controlled kill, if you will.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. So then that's the concept of the Yeasty Beast protocol. And then, I've been working with a microbiology lab in Edmonton for a really long time, like 7 years, I think now. And we developed the species. Was working with them, and together we have been really, really focusing on species specific probiotics. So
Mm.
probiotics that come from the gut
Yeah.
of the species. So dogs, cats, horses, and it's so phenomenal. It's like I don't even have time to tell you it all because it's just so incredibly interesting. And what's like, it just makes me cry when I think about the research because, you know, it produces things that are different than regular probiotics because the first thing it's like, oh, okay, so it suppresses salmonella, E. coli, clostridium, all of that stuff, this bacteria. It's like, well, of course it does, because it's coming from a dog's gut, and historically an animal should be able to eat all of that stuff and not even get sick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it makes complete sense. But then what it does, it has an immune modulation effect. And I
Mhm.
sit back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like every other animal is on pred, every other animal is on atopica. Like
Some days it seems that way.
it does.
It
So it's like, isn't this incredible that this species specific probiotic is supporting the body to modulate its immune system itself? So if it goes too high, it brings it down. If it goes too low, it brings it back up.
Right.
So that's like, it just is fascinating to me. I could just be like nerding out in it constantly. And so then it was like, okay, I really want to look back in time.
Mhm.
And, I wanted to have something that was eating a real prey diet. I
Right.
wanted to come from a feces that was eating real prey diet. Because people have said, why do you do it with dogs with raw and things like that? And I don't. And the reason that I don't is because we still have to be aware that genetically these animals were on not on raw
Mhm.
genetically. And even raw fed dogs still aren't eating like
No.
real
Yeah.
prey food, right? They're not eating
Right.
the guts of a
No.
deer and a whole rabbit or a whole mouse all at once and things like that. So we're still not quite there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do wolf. I really, really wanted to do wolf. So, and the reason is because when we look at wolves, these are big dogs. Okay. They're like up to 170 pounds,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're living,
They're
yeah,
huge.
and they're huge, and they're living till like they're 17.
Yeah.
So what is that? They can have babies when they're 10 still.
Mhm.
And they don't have,
They're not suffering the diseases that they're not getting ear infections.
no,
Yeah, I suppose they could get sarcoptic mange. I see a lot
oh
of
yeah,
with that.
yes,
But that's about
100%.
it, or trauma, an injury of some type. But
Yeah.
that's it. They're not tearing their ACLs
Yeah, or dying when they're 3 years old from cancer, or they're very
or getting a
resilient.
pyometra.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
despite many of the bitches, females, not reproducing because they aren't high enough in rank to reproduce.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing is, who's stitching them up and giving them antibiotics?
Right. Right.
And how are they surviving and evolving
Yeah.
with trauma? They get trauma probably constantly.
Yeah.
So I
Oh,
really wanted to dig into that and look at
yeah.
their resilience. And what I'm just going to say something that's more exciting to me than anything
You
is
heard
that
it
it
first.
is that I remember speaking to the main microbiologist and saying, like, is there a fingerprint? Do you think there's a fingerprint here, like DNA-ish kind of deal?
Mhm.
Because when I look at the stress levels of pets and the genetics of them not being able to be dogs, like sniff people's bums or pee wherever they want to pee, like we really are removing
Mhm.
their species oriented lifestyles. We're
Yes.
forcing them into human lifestyles, right? So do you think that it might give them that more like grounded sense, like it's awesome if they can, it's virgin poop,
Mhm.
right? They haven't been vaccinated, they haven't had revolution, they haven't had flea control, they haven't had dry dog food, they haven't had any of that stuff. Like, this is like virgin bacteria.
Yeah. They've had
um
free range deer and other prey. That's it.
Everything, right? And I thought, okay, awesome. I can see all of these health benefits, which we did when we isolated it, like
Mhm.
crazy postbiotic effects and like unbelievable. But what we couldn't know is, how was it going to affect them emotionally? And
Yes.
then all of a sudden, I started getting all of this stuff with people going, is this possible? My dog was aggressive. It's not, it's like 60% less aggressive now. My
Mhm.
dog used to do this. It's doing this now. My dog doesn't have separation. My dog separation anxiety is like way decreased. I had behaviorists reach out to me about stuff, and I can't even tell you how excited I was, because it sort of solidified for me, even though it's empirical stuff. It's not like in a
Mhm.
petri dish.
Right.
It solidified my hypothesis that bacteria holds wisdom, right? That it holds the DNA, or the whatever of wisdom. And we know that to be true because there was a mice study with a fecal transplants, and they took these mice. They were all the same, very calm, sweet lab mice.
Yeah.
They're like little pets.
Used to being handled.
Yep, and horrible things that we do to them. They
Yes.
took a group of them and they did shock treatment with them and got them super stressed and aggressive. They transplanted their feces into the calm mice, and the calm mice got stressed,
Yeah.
right? And then they did the opposite, and the other ones started getting less stressed.
Wow.
So we know that
Yeah.
exists. I
I did
didn't.
that myself. I did an FMT in a into the recipient was a goober head chocolate lab with chronic diarrhea, and I had intended to collect stool from one of my girls, who were easygoing, self-confident, but Labrador to Aussie to Labrador. And that morning I was late and I wound up grabbing poop from my male. And in hindsight, he's a powerhouse, kind of herding bred cross to show Aussie. And it was I we did the FMT, everything went well. Didn't hear from the folks the next day on our callback. Called them a couple days later and they said, it was the strangest thing. The diarrhea resolved, which was great because nothing else had touched it. But they said for 2 days he was the grumpiest dog, and that he had
Mm,
actually growled and he'd never growled before.
yeah,
Luckily, this was transitory. But I
yeah.
was like, oh my God. Yeah, he was coping with what I had put in him
Well,
unknowingly.
it's a transplant. We
It's
hear
a
about that all the
transplant.
time, right? Like
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
take a heart or you take an
Or vital
organ,
organ, yeah.
right? That it happens to people all the
Yeah.
time.
And
So
luckily, his inner Labrador won out because
oh,
they
good.
didn't, but it was totally accidental, and it's like it's colored the way I would approach that again
Yeah. Well,
very
why I was so
significantly.
excited is because this is like, for me, always less is more. I'm kind of like in that mind frame, and I don't like anything to suffer, and I'm a little bit weird about that. Like I can't stand anything suffering. And so for me, it's like I always like to find things that have, like, when you hear, oh, it's a detox, or it's this or it's that, it's like, why do we have to detox them? Like, I don't know why we have to.
Oh my
Let's
God,
find a
thank
gentle
you.
let's find a gentler way, right?
Yeah.
Let's find a way. Like, we just have to put our heads together. It might take a little
Mhm.
more work and concentration, whatever, but let's find a better way.
Yeah.
And so from my perspective with the probiotic piece, it's like, okay, well, we don't have to worry about that, right? We don't have to worry about, when, if like when you get an organ and you, what's that called, when the body doesn't accept it,
Rejects it.
rejects it, right? So we
Reject.
don't have to worry about the rejection piece. We don't have to worry about all of that stuff. But then, are we going to get that? Will we get that, emotional piece?
Mhm.
And we are. And it's like fascinating for me. Like it's just like blows me away.
Well, and as I had to write a prescription for a dog for Prozac today,
Yeah.
that I didn't start the dog on, but it's working. The owner wants to continue, and it's a good owner, tries hard.
Oh,
But, it's like, I hate doing this.
I know. I
And
know.
if we had a better way that, the average owner can cope with,
Yeah.
because
Well, that's my focus. Like my focus of ABA is removing as much suffering as I possibly can,
yeah,
right? And stress on families. Like my clinic was really family oriented, and I would bring whole families in, and even
mhm,
extended families in, if I had to try to figure out something about an animal. So, the stress, and I think that that's why people put their animals to sleep, because they can't financially afford it. They can't handle the stress around it. They can't
and
watch
they're
them
watching the dog itch and
suffer.
scratch and
I
suffer.
know. No kidding. So my whole thing is constantly is, how is this going to help this? How are we going to remove suffering? How is this going to make animals' lives and people's lives better? How is
Mhm.
it going to make the environment better? So, for me to see that this is actually doing it with a probiotic is like crazy
Oh,
exciting for
yeah,
me,
yeah.
because the amount of animals that are also, rehomed or euthanized because they've got separation anxiety, or they're aggressive, or
So the level of anxiety in pets, and, COVID certainly turned our world upside down
yeah,
and removed some socialization opportunities and training opportunities for people who got puppies because they needed something positive during
yeah,
that period.
hmm,
Um, it's just it's as someone who trains dogs too, it's like, why can't you just teach it? And they actually can't. They really can't. Um,
I
and
know.
they need the need for this is huge.
It's huge. I mean, we've been talking about gut brain access
Mhm.
for many, 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 many years. I mean, I looked at gap diets and everything in my clinic with aggressive dogs, and that was probably in what I don't even know, 2001,
Yeah,
maybe
early 2000s.
2002. Yeah. So we know it exists. We know that it makes massive differences in emotional stuff with people. So in hormones, and that's another big thing, right? It's like, taking something like a wolf, where they haven't genetically been altered for a long, long time, like hormones, right? Like
Right,
sex
right.
hormones, and also their mental state. They have lots of stress because they are, being crowded out of their homes, and, like like urban things pushing in and stuff. But the pack that we used are really, really remote. Like they're
Mhm.
way out there. And that was my hope, was to be able to sort of like have that animal remember what it's like to be calm, like what is it really like to be, in a pack, and social, and things like that. So it's really cool. I'm doing lots more.
So tell me about this pack, this remote pack.
Yeah,
How you go out there and collect wolf poop,
yeah,
basically?
they did in
Is it for you?
in Edmonton. So
Mhm.
yeah, and followed that pack for quite a while before deciding to use that pack. Specific criterias, things like that.
And how big is the pack
I think
about?
I think pretty big. Like I think that one was, I want to say, high 20s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and old, like, been people have been, like, marking, knowing, like, okay, that's a great, that one's been, like, I don't know, like, that's, like, a great-grandfather, or that's,
Yeah,
I
they
remember when
know
I
how
looked.
many generations that wolf has
Yeah,
been
yeah,
around for.
100%. I remember him being in BC and doing that with whale watching once, right?
Mhm.
And I went out on a 21-day excursion way out in the Johnson Strait on kayaks. Had to be flown in and everything, and we followed these pods of whales to something called the rubbing rocks, which is still this really incredible spiritual thing that they don't really still know why they do it. It's all
Mhm.
these theories. And being able to, go, oh, that was the grandmother, that's the great grandmother of that pod, and this is the great thing of this
Mhm.
pod. And it's, there are biologists doing the same thing with wolves. So it's really fascinating and
It
and
is.
life changing, really, when you think about it.
That is fascinating. So, and you're the only one doing this that I've ever heard of,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Well,
You know,
then I
so
I
you
kind
you clearly think outside the box or stretch the box a little bit,
yeah, I would
just a
say
little.
so.
A little.
But then I went into, like, prebiotics, right? Because
Mhm.
I have always, so I started using larch, because this is interesting too. This
Sure.
was way back in my formulas in my clinic, because I'm like, how would a dog get FOS? How is it going to get inulin? How is it going to, like, what? I don't understand what this is doing. I feel like there's got to be a prebiotic that's more species specific. So
Mhm.
there I go, and I'm delving into, like, okay, so what do deers eat? What do rabbits eat? What do squirrels eat? What do birds eat?
Mhm.
Like, anything that
Yeah.
a cat or a dog wild would consume. What do those animals eat that are producing that prebiotic effect in the gut that then the prey animals are eating?
Mhm.
And the one thing that they all ate when I was doing this, like, 20 years ago, was bark,
Yeah,
tree
birds.
bark,
Yeah.
right? So that's what larch is. It's the bark of the
Tree.
larch tree.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like that was, and it provides incredible prebiotic. And there's been lots of, immune mediated studies with it and stuff. So to me, it was a functional prebiotic. It actually did something. And that's the other thing for ABA, for Adored Beast, is I won't formulate one single thing that doesn't have every single solitary thing is functional and medicinal. Like, I
You
won't
have
put
no inner ingredients at all.
nothing, nothing,
That is
like,
awesome.
nothing ever. And not only, like, it's not no fillers, but everything has to be, in my brain, have a functionality, be like a functional food, or have a function in that formula to produce that formula to have even better results.
Yeah.
So, I look at that as a functional prebiotic. And then when I came out with our wolf one, and with one called Soil and Sea, I did a really big study with the microbiology lab to look at turkey tail as a
Mm.
prebiotic, and look at chlorella as a prebiotic.
Okay.
And the reason I did that was because our Soil and Sea is made from soil. So for me, I didn't want to put anything in it that was bacteria that didn't come from that sort of atmosphere, right? So I wanted to try to find a prebiotic from the ocean or water,
Right.
right? And
Right.
then, so that it was soil and sea, or water and dirt,
Mhm.
right? And so we did the chlorella research, and it's proven to be incredible as a prebiotic. And also, it has incredible functional antioxidants, and it does all
Yeah,
kinds of
that's what
cool
I'm
stuff.
most familiar with using it.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then turkey tail, I have a medicinal mushroom forest, which is another
Mhm.
whole huge thing that I do. And I can clearly see who eats our turkey tails.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, those animals are eating them, and those animals are being eaten. So let's take a look at turkey tail, because we all know what that does. Like,
Yeah.
we all know the benefits of turkey
Oh,
tail. Like, there's,
and mushrooms in general.
in general. So then we did our research on turkey tail and found it to be an incredible prebiotic as well.
Yeah.
So I got really excited about that because I'm adamant about using functional prebiotics. So then we started developing functional prebiotics.
That's
That.
excellent. Because I always feel like people are pushing, oh, feed some cruciferous vegetables or feed this or feed that. Um, and again, that goes back to your comment on sourcing. Where's it coming from? What's
Yeah.
it sprayed with? You know, what else is it bringing along for the ride?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's nice because, it's old, right?
Mhm.
Like chlorella is billions of years old and turkey tail is hundreds of thousands of years
At
old.
least.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's,
and thinking of the cancer angle, because I mean, we all know mushrooms are phenomenal for cancer, and you know, there's a lot of details from that. But
yeah.
I always think of, does wildlife get cancer? I don't I don't think there's a great number of them. And
Yeah.
today I work mornings at the hospital, so 8 to noon. And I had one dog with cancer, presumably from a kidney, meted to the chest. I mean, just a sea of cancer. My colleague has a dog, osteosarcoma in the forelimb, meted to the
Mhm.
chest. You know, both came as a total shock to the owners. And it's like, okay, we had 2 in 1 morning. What's the incidence in wildlife and why? Why is
Yeah.
the incidence so much better?
Yeah. And I think, when we're looking at deer and we're looking at things that are like chowing down on glyphosates, we're going to see it more,
Yeah.
where they're eating,
Well, I wonder about, like,
along
geese at the golf course,
golf courses.
because those geese are on the lawn, they're in the water, we know they're spraying chemicals and those go in the water. I wonder
Yeah.
what a glyphosate level would be on a Canadian goose at a golf course.
Oh,
It'd have to be astronomical, wouldn't it?
it would be. It would be. And any time you see a deer when you're driving by and they're in a hayfield, right? Or they're in a wherever, or they're drinking out of a stream where they've just literally gone down the forest and completely sprayed it. We have a company out here. It's an oil company, um and even our power companies, in order for the trees not to grow up
Mhm.
around the hydro lines and stuff,
Yeah.
they spray pesticides and glyphosates everywhere, and herbicides and stuff. It's just
Yeah.
gross and disgusting. It's just awful. So, I think we're probably going to see it more in wildlife, right? But
Yeah,
at least
in
they
urban wildlife, let's say, for lack
yeah,
of better.
yeah, for sure. So, at least they have the freedom and they're not eating like processed stuff
Yeah,
with glyphosates in it. So,
yeah, so
it's
there's 2
like the
sides.
layering effect, right?
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, so it's exciting to I'm really lucky that I have this lab that I work with,
mm,
and I can try all these different things. I can have an idea and go, okay, I want to try this, and let's work on
yeah,
this, and let's look at
and
that.
you're diving into some cancer work too, aren't you? Yeah,
That's the exciting part.
that has that has to be, I mean, everybody, you know, it's the disease to take on because, you know, like I said, 2 of us this morning.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I decided to and I think they're going to put it in the chat. So this is the first time publicly I've talked about it.
Mm,
And so yeah, I've been working with Dalhousie University for almost 5 years now with cancer research. And again, just like my veterinary hospital, it was really hard because I had this hypothesis and this idea, but it didn't fall in the boxes of cancer research, which is really strict.
yeah,
Super, super like you got to do it this way. You can't change it this way. It's got to look like this and it has to smell like this and taste like this and be
mhm.
like this. It's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? Because my brain doesn't even work like that. Right. So I
Oh,
have this hypothesis. I think this is going to be great and wonderful and whatever. And it's like, how do I even do that? So again, shout out to my business partner, Dion Albert, because I wanted to do it. And we spent a lot of money with lawyers to, you know, work with the institution of Dalhousie University. And thank you, Dalhousie University, for being open to it.
yeah,
And so what I wound up doing, because I wanted to look at cancer treatment cancer prevention. I wanted to look at the whole gamut. It's because, like, yeah, you can look at cancer treatment, like treating cancer, killing cancer, whatever you want to call it here, cancer treatment. But what if we could, whatever's killing it, doesn't it make sense that it could prevent it? Like, we're not talking chemo here, right? Because
Right,
chemo's not preventing anything.
right.
But if I can look at, if we can look at, if we can all put our heads together as a society and in humanity and go, okay, this natural product has the potential of fighting cancer. It's like, okay, well then wouldn't it prevent it? Wouldn't it, couldn't it be like, something that might help,
Yeah.
our bodies to derail it, to understand it, to
Or
look at it, to be
when the
able to
first cell starts to go wrong.
wrong, right? Like,
Or the
how come?
first,
What's going on?
yeah.
So I wound up doing 4 researches at the same time. So that's like, okay, if I can't do it that way, I got to figure out how to do it. So
Yeah.
we did 4 different things. And what's super cool, it's mammalian, so it's people and animals. And
Mhm.
one of the big things I want to do was osteosarcoma, because it's such a progressive disease, and by the time it's diagnosed, it's like basically,
When you see that swelling, you're done. You're
yeah,
done.
it's 90% of the time it's in the lungs already, and then they get their their limbs removed, and like, yeah, it just breaks my heart. And so we got canine osteosarcoma cells and lymphoma cells, and then we looked at human breast cancer and liver cancer.
Mhm.
And I have a medicinal mushroom forest, and I've been into medicinal mushrooms for a very, very long time. I was really lucky, and I worked with I was so lucky. I haven't been so lucky. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. I worked with a traditional Chinese medicine doctor from China,
Mhm.
and he taught me everything about mushrooms at my clinic. And it definitely wasn't about, there's this much, triterpenes, and it's this much, uh, um, polyphenols and beta glucans, and it, like,
Mhm.
those things didn't even come up, because
Right.
this was
This
real
yeah.
traditional. So it was all about the doctrine and signatures, which
Mhm.
meant you look at this mushroom, and then you look at every single piece about it. You dissect it, you look how the mycelium works, you look at what it works with, and who it grows with, and what it grows on, and what its characteristics are, and then you match it with the tumor.
Mhm.
Right. And then you have to, that's where I got really interested in physiology. It's
Yeah.
like, where does that tumor come from? How is it getting there? What's the characteristic of that tumor? Why is it hitting this dog? Why is it hitting this age? Why is it doing, like, so I worked with him for 3 years, and really got into that. And because of that, I became a really super, like, nerd about the doctrine of signatures of mushrooms, and the wisdom and the communication. I was really lucky because I um David Suzuki and that whole crew. I was involved with the study at UBC, where they looked at the mother tree, and they injected a particular gas into the mother tree, and they knew for a fact that the mother tree shut down specific was able to shut down specific uh oh my god, roots, and
Wow.
send specific gases to specific trees that needed it through
Wow.
the mycelium of
Wow.
mushrooms. So they communicate. They
Yeah.
literally, in the ground, communicate. And then the mushrooms do that, but then the mushrooms get fed by that. So they're transporting, and they're creating, and they're communicating. And so I was part of, I knew about that study, like, oh my gosh, like 2008,
Mhm.
maybe 2008, I think. So then that even got me more interested. It's like, how do mushrooms in the forest, like, what do the mushrooms in the forest know that the mushrooms that are grown in bags don't know? Or what, like,
Right.
where does the
Yeah.
wisdom go? Right? Like, where does this wisdom actually go? My personal belief is that all mushrooms work, whether they're grown in oats, or I don't care what they're grown in,
Commercially or in the
or
forest.
commercially or not commercially. I have no judgment on anything, and I think people need to, use what they believe in. because I think that energy is also really important. If I take this and I give this to my dog and I'm like, oh, I don't think it's going to work,
That's
compared
why.
to, oh, there's all this science and this is amazing and this has grown how I like it. That energy is going to make a difference as well. So anyways, I started working, doing my research at Dell. And then I started this research at this mushroom forest, right? We started looking at wild mushrooms, and we started looking at rewilding clear cuts and reintroducing like the ecosystem and things and what would happen. I can't tell you, Lori, like what I've learned in that forest would blow your mind. So, okay, this mushroom's not supposed to grow here and it's not supposed to fruit at this time of the year. It's like, you know what? Tell them, let them do what they want to do. It's like, I don't know anything. You're not supposed to be growing now, Rishi. What are you doing? Like, they're everywhere.
I like it.
It's like,
yeah.
and then it's like, okay, well, why? What happened? What's going
What
on?
changed? What factor was the tipping?
Everything. It's so interesting. So, anyways, I started doing this research, and I'm a big, massive phytoplankton fan. I think it's one of the most amazing things in the world. And I'm also a mushroom fan. So I started, the whole research was the synergistic process of chaga, mushroom, or fungi, and phytoplankton. What would they do together? What isolates? What did they do? Whatever. So really interesting. So it's been an in vitro research project with Dalhousie and I, and Vasantha, which is my head scientist there at Dalhousie as well. And he's been amazing with me too. Like when he first met me, he just shook his head and didn't even know what I was thinking. But he's been wonderful with me and so patient and incredible with me, and allowed me to really head a lot of it. Right. Like, and so we've finished our fourth phase. We're going into our fifth phase now. And Dalhousie really loves it if they can get peer-reviewed journal science out of it. So they said to us, can you put it into this open research? And open research is even harder to get peer-reviewed than closed research because it's open to people that want to doing their PhD, and then they can take that research and cite that research for their PhD and stuff. So it has to be even, because it's not just scientists looking at it, it's everyone. So the peer review process is even harder.
Sure.
Anyways, we put it in thinking, okay, whatever, we'll put it in, and it was accepted. So we have, and it is really amazing because it is clearly affecting the cancer cells, but it's not killing the healthy cells like chemo does. And it's completely sustainable, right? It's a sustainable, the way we're doing it is completely sustainable. So
awesome.
It's really exciting. Like I'm super excited. So
yeah, that is. And I mean, having been and guys, if you have questions, please pop them in the comments. The comment section is kind of quiet today. I'm wondering if some of our comments are not getting through. So
okay.
We'll go back when the recording goes up. We'll zip back through and see if we can fill in any blanks people may have.
Sure.
But that is phenomenal. And having been influenced heavily by Dr. Kendra Pope, who is an oncologist but does not do chemo at all, what you're saying is just inspiring. Really.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting. Did I freeze?
No, I think you're good.
Oh, good. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very exciting, and I'm really I feel really blessed and very thankful that I've had so much support in my life,
Yeah. I mean, I love your life story. It's like everything just happened the way it needed to. Alicia has a quick question, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking about of could these compounds prevent cancer as well as treat? So which of your protocols would you start proactively?
For cancer
Um,
or
I
for anything?
I suspect she's talking about cancer because of when she popped in.
Okay. Um, so for me, anytime there's chronic inflammation, we're kind of going down that road, right? So, um, I always look at gut health no
Mhm,
matter what. I always start with gut health. And if there is some kind of immune mediated, even thought of immune mediation, whether it's allergies, whether it's arthritis, like immune mediated arthritis, whether there's immune mediated disease happens everywhere with everything. Like even collapsing trachea to me is can be caused from leaky gut syndrome, because I feel like whatever the animal's predisposition is. So let's say it's a chihuahua and it has a predisposition to get a collapsing trachea when it's 10, and
yeah.
all of a sudden starts getting it when it's 9, I
Mhm,
mean 9, 3 or 4, then there's something going on that's expediting that predisposition. So I'm always like, okay, let's look at the gut. Let's feed, make sure that the liver, kidney, gallbladder, pancreas is functioning correctly.
mhm.
And then let's make sure that we're feeding something like, things with antioxidants.
Sure.
So I'm a big rotational person. I
Mhm,
love rotating things. So I usually say to people, start with the leaky gut protocol,
mhm,
and then start, depending on how sick the animal is, right? Like if we're just doing it proactively, like she's mentioned, I think that the leaky gut protocol is really good because we're dealing with over vaccination, or even the mothers being over vaccinated, right? Like even
sure.
if you don't vaccinate your animal at all, has the mother been vaccinated or the father been vaccinated,
Mhm,
over vaccinated?
yeah.
So the leaky gut is a very high level foundational protocol to go through. And then what I would do is I would really highly recommend that you go through phytoplankton, our mushroom supplements, and our wolf, our probiotics. So you and I made it to make it simple, because it's like, you don't want to have to be a rocket scientist every time you feed your dog or your cat. So it's like, go through some phytoplankton. Then when it's done, go into turkey tail. When it's done, go into the wolf strain. When
Mhm,
it's done, go in, like you can just arbitrarily rotate through from a proactive perspective through all of our probiotics in our mushrooms and our phytoplankton, right? Because then you're looking at amino acids, you're
mhm.
looking at the highest amount of superoxide dismutase in the world in our phytoplankton, because tetrasod, which is a specific strain of phytoplankton, has the most superoxide dismutase of anything in the world.
Yeah.
So that is to me proactive, and lots and lots and lots of love and exercise and
And
freedom.
sunlight and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Love that. Katie had a question. Here we go. Uh, Testing for inflammation. I'm familiar with Dr. Jean Dodd's test,
Yeah.
and also VDI Reference Lab, where I do a lot of my vitamin D testing and such, also has some inflammation markers. Have you
Yeah.
used them or any others?
I've used all kinds of different, like C factors and all different
Mhm.
things.
Any favorites?
No, no, I think that that's where you have to sort of dig in with your vet. And I love Gene Dodds. I was
Oh,
using Gene
she's
Dodds
awesome.
kind of before I was, you know, she was another one. I wrote about thyroid panels and how T4s and TSHs, or T4s and just T3s and T4s don't do anything, or
Yeah.
TSHs don't really do anything.
I've still
And
got colleagues running a T4 and saying, "Oh, it's fine."
I know, and I got into so much trouble again.
Oh, yeah.
And she really helped me out, and she sent a whole bunch of stuff, and she was wonderful. But we were the first clinic in Canada to work with Jean,
Yeah.
so
And
I
Jean is
love.
Canadian, for Pete's sake. I
I
mean,
know
we
she
had her
is.
down here in Albany for many years.
Yeah,
I remember taking blood to her lab because she would do clotting factors for us and such for
yeah.
free. And was we couldn't get them anyplace else.
Yeah.
And
And
so
and
we
you know
broke.
what else I love about Jean is that she's very pragmatic, and she connects dots, and
Yeah.
she's a trailblazer, you
Mhm.
know, herself.
She is.
And she's a wonderful woman. I love her. So I would trust anything that she does, for sure. But Katie, what I would like to say too is that um I like, again, I'm a big lab, you know, so long as it's not invasive. I love tests, and I love laboratory stuff,
Yeah.
but I'm a big believer in observation. I'm a big observer. And I really, really love it when people can observe everything with their dogs, right? And their animals. Like, what's their breath smell like? Do their eyes look red at night? You know, look inside their ears. Are their ears all of a sudden red at 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Mhm.
Um, are there, you know, do they smell different? Does their fur, does their coat feel different? There are so many ways to understand whether your animal has chronic inflammation, and then, like, what are you going to do about it? So with me, that was one of our criterias of every one of our probiotics. Like, all of our species oriented probiotics are anti-inflammatory. They have huge inflammation restrictors, and it is one, like I said, it's one two biggest criterias are, you know, inflammatory markers and uh immune modulation, which to me go hand in hand. And then, you know, their ability to create postbiotics that suppress, you know, pathogenic bacteria and stuff. So, you know, we can run a lot of tests, but for me, we have so much at our fingertips because everything's inflammation. Like, I feel like almost everything is, the two things I look at is suppression and
Mm.
inflammation.
Yeah.
You know, suppressive drugs, suppressive lifestyles, and because it's going to come somewhere. You push something down, it's just going to pop up somewhere else, and when it does, it's going to be way more inflammatory
Mhm.
because it's going to be ticked off. In other words, like, you could think
Yeah.
of it in that way,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of proactive stuff you can do for chronic inflammation and to prevent it.
Good. Let's do one more because I know we're
Sure.
running way over. Um, so Janet has a friend with elevated liver enzymes after using Bravecto, one of my least favorite drugs, and Rimadyl. And this is a
Mhm.
scenario I think that comes up in the real world a lot as people transition to
Yeah.
more natural things. So
Yeah.
suggestions for supporting the liver and helping the arthritis. He's been switched to a fresh food diet. I guess
Yeah.
that's Dr. Harvey's that they're using.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I worked with it lots. So again, I come from a perspective of that I can't compartmentalize anything. I have a very hard time compartmentalizing anything. So when I look at the liver, I don't ever look at the liver. I
Mhm.
look at the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, and the kidneys. It's like I feel like I can't look at either one of those organs without looking at all of them. So the formula that we produce, that I started at my clinic, oh my gosh, like probably the first year that I started practicing, was our liver tonic, and it's
Mhm.
really mild. And it can be really mild because it supports all of those organs at the same time. So
Okay.
they work together. So let's say I start, feeling, you and I are going for a walk and I'm tired, and it's like, okay, can I just like lean on you a little bit for a minute? And you're like, oh sure, yeah, lean on me. And then you're like, oh yeah, like now I'm getting tired because you're leaning on me. So,
Mhm.
you know, so they lean on each other big time. So why wait? Why just focus on the liver and then wait till the
Great.
pancreas tanks? Like, it's just it's a
Yeah.
to me, it's always a synergistic process. So we use very specific herbs in our liver tonic, and we have
Mhm.
found it phenomenal, and phenomenal with a very low percentage of those herbs. So you can use them, like Rita Hogan. That's one of her favorite things, is our liver tonic, because she says you can use it all the time. Like there's no concern about rotating it or pulsing it or anything like that. So definitely, and it really, like, I can show you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of blood panels where it's brought liver enzymes down and
Yeah.
really supported it.
Yeah.
And then as far as the arthritis goes, this is really interesting because for me, arthritis is, it's a fine line too, because there's a lot of arthritic formulas out there that are kind of hard on the liver. Like they're when you look at those herbs are kind of not okay to be giving on a regular basis. They're
Mhm.
herbs that you probably would want to pulse and would want to rotate, right? But you're giving it every day because your dog has arthritis every day. It makes total
Mhm.
sense. So that's why we don't, right at the moment, have a actual arthritis formula from a herb perspective, but we have one from a homeopathic perspective.
Ah,
And exactly the same reason is you can give it every day. It doesn't,
yeah.
it's not going to hurt, but it support doesn't just support the joint. It's an anti-inflammatory. It deals with cartilage, muscle, ligament, tendon, and joint. So it's like the entire structure
Yeah.
of that muscular skeletal system. So, from my perspective, when you look at two things that are creating a sort of a scary process,
Mhm.
I would just go to a homeopathic arthritis support and then really get the liver back in
Yeah.
check.
Yeah. Thanks, Diane, for popping that in. So, Julianne, it's 3:23 already. Wow.
Sorry. Oh
No,
my God.
this is great. This is exactly what I hoped for, and exactly why I'm so excited that ABA will be at the expo in the exhibit hallway, probably next door to Rita Hogan,
Yep.
who is, I'm thrilled she's also coming. She'll be lecturing to everybody, and I don't know if you know this, she's doing a workshop for my VIPs, a hands-on herb making, get your thing
So
going.
awesome. So
It's gonna be
awesome.
awesome. Because
Yes.
that's half the fun. It's like be in Rita's kitchen, so to speak.
Yeah, totally.
So that
Totally.
it's gonna be great. So
It will
guys,
be.
thank you so much for hanging in here with us. And if we didn't get to your questions, we are gonna try to go back through the comments when the replay goes up and try to get answers and links.
Yeah, for sure.
All the links are in there, but scroll back and forth. You'll find them, and we'll add some as is appropriate. And be
Awesome.
sure to go to healthydogexpo.com. Grab your tickets. There are still some VIP slots available for extra programming, breakfast, wine and cheese. We will have an awesome time.
That's wonderful.
And I will be back soon with the next one of our guests. So thank
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. It's like, there's always, you know, I can be doing all the research and background stuff, but it's got to get out there. So thank you
you.
for doing all this.
Yeah, it's my passion, like yours is the research. I love connecting people to what I consider my expert friends, and
Awesome.
I'm blessed to
Thank you.
have them. So thank you guys. Take care.
Thank you.